Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We've been working with our partners Kia UK this summer. Kia have been embedded in the world of cricket for almost 15 years. They've actively supported the rise of women's cricket since 2014 and have been the proud sponsors of Surrey County Cricket Club for the last decade. During each episode of the podcast, Kia have been providing you with an opportunity to get closer to the action through their Kia's Movement That Inspires moment. These include tickets and experiences to key cricket competitions across the summer. Listen out each week to hear how you could get involved and win the opportunity of a lifetime. Anyway, on with the show. Just as we thought the series was petering out with that final day rain, it pulled us back in. Chris Woakes, Moeen Ali and Stuart Broad taking 7 wickets between them in the final session as England secured a series-levelling victory. The 2023 Men's Ashes finishes 2-2. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today is Jo Harman, Phil Walker and Melinda Farrell. But first, let's head to Mark Butcher on another crazy Ashes finish. Mark, with the games coming so thick and fast, it's been hard to step back and take it all in. Firstly, 4 genuinely really close test matches, either won by 3 or fewer wickets or 50 or fewer runs. In terms of session-to-session swings in momentum, can you think of any series you either played in or watched that comes anywhere close?
No, I can't think of one. The only game that didn't have that was Old Trafford. The only game where one team was entirely dominant from toss to washout was the Old Trafford game, and the rest they just swung backwards and forwards. I suppose the first session yesterday morning where England just cracked the game open after Australia had played so well last night, it made it very unlikely that Australia would win the game. But even so, the Smith-Head partnership, you just thought, well, they're cruising it again, until the wizard, Mr. Woakes, intervened once more. And the rest of it was batshit, wasn't it? The whole series was completely crazy. And the weird thing is that it will go down as sort of being about the competing philosophies and all that kind of stuff. And I still don't buy that really, because Australia have always tried to play the game on the front foot ever since year dot. It was always the Australians are the ones kind of trying to push the game forward and and attack and all that kind of things, and the English are more staid. Well, obviously, we know that's not the case with Brendan and Ben. But what happened was that Australia found that the only way they could hang in there was by sitting in, which is a great testament to England's skill, really, and their intention. And I guess the thing that cost England the series outright was just a little bit of a lack of just nailing things down when the going was good in those first 2 tests. Because otherwise, I don't think it's out of order to say that England were the better team over the course of all 5 test matches. And if you'd have told me that I'd be saying that at the end of the series from the very beginning, then I would have found that quite a hard take to take.
I mean, when you go down from 1 to 11 from England, pretty much everyone played somewhere near their best or potentially exceeded expectations. And to come from 2-0 behind to actually almost feel disappointed not to win it 3-2 against a very good Australia side who just thumped India in the World Test Championship final, an Australia side who obliterated England only 18 months ago. It's actually, when you take a step back, it's one hell of an achievement for England, and not... Everyone was trying to turn it into a referendum on does Bazball work, but for them to compete like this against this Australia side is quite something.
Yeah, and it does work. I mean, it's categorically it does work. Why does it work? Well, I mean, the thing you mentioned there at the beginning was quite important. It's empowered every single one of England's players to play in a way and express themselves in a way that they would never have been able to do under previous regimes, under the pressure of an Ashes series and everything that goes along with that. So that's just a huge tick. That man management style that kind of says to you, it's okay. Absolutely everything is okay. put your work in, make sure that your game's in decent order, and go out and do what we picked you for, with no recriminations. And it's just, and that's meant that everybody has been able to play, as you said, over up to or above their previous level. So on that score, it's a massive tick. And on all levels, really. I mean, look, the interesting thing, I suppose, is that on a much more sort of boring test match style level, or test series level, is that Australia were kind of ready at the beginning with obviously the World Test Championship and all the rest of it, and England certainly were not. Players were all a little undercooked, and perhaps that baked into some of the errors that were made in those first two tests. But it's absolutely undeniable that England finished the stronger, despite the fact that 2/3 of them were broken by the end of the test match. Just the whole attitude. Australia looked world weary. They looked like they're just hanging on by their fingernails by the end, and England just kept finding extra reserves of strength to keep surging forward. The Broady spell at the end was spectacular. I mean, I don't think he ran in as hard or as well at any point in the rest of the series, and he bowled bloody well up until then too. And so it just, it's an utter vindication of the way that they played. And look, you can still question decisions made on selection. Of course you can. It's nobody's job to just sit there and go, oh yeah, well that makes perfect sense if it doesn't. But in the end, everything sort of came round full circle, and there is a justification there for just about every decision that was made. And you can make an equal argument to say that had they made a slightly different decision, that person or those people would have done well too, because the environment that they're being brought into. So, it's just it seems like a fabulous place to be playing cricket at the moment.
And pivotal to that resurgence was Chris Woakes. I was delighted that he got the Player of the Series gong. He was the bowler of the series ahead of several bigger names who generally receive more attention. So let's give him the attention he deserves now. How good was he, and what was it that made him so threatening pretty much at every stage he bowled in those final three test matches?
Look, I'm not entirely sure, really. His record in England, it speaks for itself anyway. He's always fantastic and competitive here. But I don't know. I don't think I'd ever seen him bowl with such consistent menace before. I can't put my finger on it exactly. He'd been out of the game for a long time, hadn't played a single test under Brendan. Had a really chastening time of it on tours of the West Indies. Has already spoken about the fact that he probably won't be playing any overseas test matches, or doesn't want to, because of the disparity between his numbers at home and away, and the fact that he wants to play all three formats still. So all of that's fantastic, but why did he have such consistent menace from the time that he came in? And I can't really put my finger on it. I don't think I've ever seen him bowl. He bowled very, very heavy deliveries the whole time, and that was the thing. Sometimes you think of Chris Woakes and it's a little bit floaty, and it's kind of searching for a bit of swing or a bit of movement. And batters are on the front foot and they're driving him, and and he kind of looks unthreatening. At no point was that the case from coming in at Headingley. He found a groove. He found a length the whole time that was absolutely perfect between not being able to get forward to it, not being able to get back, and the ball just seemed to be slapping into that length. And any time there was a bit of movement, it was always in the right place to cause high class batters problems. It could be that after all that time out, when you're an experienced player, when you've played a lot of cricket, having time out of the game is not a big deal, because the brain, what you're supposed to do. The situation and the occasion doesn't overawe you. You've been there and done it before, but what it does allow is for your body to recover, basically, for your body to be in the best possible shape it can be in to begin with. And if you start there and you start well, I mean, he took an early wicket. He spoke about that post match. Took an early wicket, and that kind of settled him in, and the body feels great. And you have all the other stuff behind you, which is the great backing that you're going to get from Baz and from Ben, and you put all of those things together, and suddenly you've got a lethal weapon in your hands. I mean, his spells, every single one of them, yesterday, albeit with the extraordinary ball change, were just magnificent. He just looked like he was going to take a wicket every ball, and he thoroughly deserved it. His performances with the bat as well down at the end there, the win at Headingley. valuable runs down at the bottom end. He thoroughly deserved it.
Nasser touched on it on commentary and on how Anderson wasn't swinging the ball as much as we're used to, and I thought that was an interesting comparison with Woakes. And I wanted to ask you that we sort of assume in how we talk about Woakes is he's someone who only really does well when the ball is moving, without giving him actually that much credit for he actually gets the ball to move more and more consistently and for longer than other bowlers. And there's a skill in that, right? And being able to control that we almost take for granted because it's the most English skill, being able to swing a deep ball, but he actually does it better than most other bowlers.
Yeah, and there's seam movement in that as well. And there was a great, again, the hold of line and length was incredible, because I remember we talk about Australia's batting in the first innings of this Test match and how long it took them to get that lead. Which actually, in the end, you can say that it wasn't a lot of fun to watch, but in the end, it could and should have put them in a position where, where they might go on and win the game, having given their bowlers a bit more of a rest, etc. But England barely got cut or pulled in that innings, and Woakes didn't. I don't think he got cut or pulled. Again, maybe Steve Smith might have got one away at him throughout the course of definitely throughout the course of the last day. And that tells you that sort of, regardless of whether the ball is moving or not, your control over where you're putting it, and the pressure that you're putting on batters, and the fact that they're not getting any freebies, is a skill in itself. And one that is often overlooked as being sort of something that you would say, every Test match bowler should be able to do it. Well, quite a lot of them can't. This has been proven. Look, he just, and he's so unassuming, and he might, Ben might be able to change his mind about going to India, and I think if he was wise, he'd probably say no. In the same way as as Moeen Ali said, he'd delete the text messages if he got another one for him to go to India, which was a lovely line at the back end.
And to finish, we mentioned it briefly, but Stuart Broad charging into a trio of left-handers in the evening light from the pavilion end, moving the ball away from them. It was just written in the stars, and everything from Broad the last few days, I thought, just summed him up perfectly. The theatre of the announcement, taking a twofer but stealing all the headlines, the showmanship and mind games of the bail swap, and then, in the most broad way possible to sign off, really, really turning up for the big moment at the end of the game when the match was there and needed to be won. He was the one who did it. Just a perfect way for Stuart Broad, the man, to end his Test career.
Yeah, it was Stuart Broad, wasn't it? The whole thing. The spell was magnificent again. I mean, I couldn't imagine being able to not nick those deliveries at the back end there. I mean, they were so vicious. And again, the line was perfect, the length was perfect, and the movement at times. That ball was, well, we don't know how old that ball was, but it was it was definitely upwards of 60 overs old, that ball, and it was absolutely irresistible stuff. The deliveries that got rid of Murphy and poor old Carey was hoping for a bit of redemption, wasn't he? At the back end there, he kind of came out and played as well as he'd gone really quiet with the bat after Lords. And you just thought, oh, maybe there's another twist in this story. But you're not nicking those balls. They were absolutely magnificent. And then the atmosphere at the Oval, I popped out the commentary box at the end there, the last sort of 15, 20 minutes was as good as I'd ever heard anywhere, including World Cup semi-finals in the football. It's just absolutely electric. And what a way to finish. Hit your last ball in Test cricket for 6. Take a wicket with your last ball in Test cricket and stride off into the sunset with your headband on.
I mean, you just touched on it there. I thought the atmosphere was as good as I can remember at any cricket ground, maybe the World Cup final aside, really. And it was still pretty flat around the rain delay because we didn't know how long we'd be off. There was chat that we wouldn't actually get on until 5 or so, which would probably not give England enough time to take the 7 wickets that they needed. But just something awoke in the crowd when Moeen got head and then Woakes gets smithed a couple of overs later as well. It was almost like English cricket just realised, hang on, we can't let Australia go home with the series here. And it's sort of like a spirit took everyone involved with the game into a certain direction when it hadn't really looked like it was going that way for the large part of the Australia innings up until that point.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think the crowd played an enormous part, didn't they? throughout the sort of like the three must-win Test matches. And a lot of that was to do with the stumping incident. You know, even people that knew in their heart of hearts that there was absolutely nothing wrong with it and it was fine. You use it, don't you? And everybody did to really get behind England and you know and put Australia on the back foot. And playing in that atmosphere as a visitor must have been very, very tough. You know, you rarely get that, I would think, in Test match cricket, where every day and every ball, the kind of like the crowd are just right at you, right on your backs. And some of it was over the top, but most of it was fine. And so, yeah, I mean, every time it felt a little bit like being at Canterbury or something like that, where the opposition hits a great shot for four and you just get nothing, you know, just like complete and utter silence. And the small pockets of Aussie fans who'd been there through the whole thing were kind of unable to rise above the noise of the home crowd. And like I said, it was absolutely fabulous there last night. It was really, you know, you got the goosebumps and the chills going down your back there towards the end. And you just knew that Stuart was going to finish it. You just absolutely knew it. There was nothing else on earth that was going to happen except for Stuart Broad finish that game and go charging off with the boys running in his wake behind him.
Mm. Yeah, a fitting end to a remarkable series. Cheers for your time, Butch. On to the 100.
I'm going to go get some sleep.
Kia want to help you get closer to the action and create inspiring memories that will last a lifetime. Last year, they gave a local cricket team the chance to get coached at the Kia Oval by Surrey legends Alex Stewart, Gareth Batty and Azhar Mahmood. This year, they're continuing to give back to young cricket fans. This week's Kia's Movement That Inspires moment is that Kumar Sangakkara and other legends of the game will be leading a morning training session at the Kia Oval, followed by a tournament on the hallowed turf. So if you're 11 to 16 years old, or your kids are, and would like to experience this on the 23rd of September, all you need to do is enter by the link in the description. Mel, could we have wished for anything more at the start of the summer? From the very first ball, which felt 7 years ago when Zak Crawley punched coming through cover for four, to Stuart Broad walking off into the sunset after winning the fifth Test match. Just an incredible series from ball one to the very end.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? And when you think it finishes with Stuart Broad waltzing off into the sunset, having made sure that Alex Carey will be remembered for something else other than Lords. You had Moeen Ali. What a remarkable storyline that was. Justice for Chris Woakes, who I just always feel every time he does something, hits the winning runs at Headingley, and everyone talks about Mark Wood. He gets 2 wickets in an over, one with an absolute peach at Old Trafford, and it's all Johnny Bairstow, what a catch. And then, you know, he takes 4 for that day and it's all Stuart Broad. And I was actually just so happy that he was named player of the series, because even though Broad's on the back pages and front pages of every single newspaper, when you go back in history, he will go down as player of the series. But I suppose the only thing that probably some people will have wished for was a 3-2 scoreline one way or the other. But yeah, no, it's that their details, aren't they? What we've been treated to is an absolutely glorious series. I mean, I wasn't here for, obviously 2005 is before my time covering cricket, so I don't have the same attachment to it that I think a lot of the other journalists in particular have, and people over here as well. But for me, this will absolutely go down. I'll remember this for the rest of my life.
Phil, can you remember enjoying a series this much?
No. No, I can't. 2005 has a special thing for obvious reasons, and you know, personally it does, because that was my first full year doing this nonsense, and that probably felt more dramatic because there was so much on the line. It felt like English cricket's reputation, self-esteem, what was left of it was on the line, and you felt like if England hadn't got something from that series, and they were never ever going to get anything from any series again against Australia. This has been more of a meeting of 2 titanic teams on the same kind of level, and obviously, you know, a clash of philosophies as well. But whereas 05 had moments of dominance from one side to the other, and 2 draws in the 5. In this instance, it was compelling as much for its vulnerabilities as anything else as well. No one really quite knew which side was going to fall over first and which side was going to be able to stay on their feet. In the fullness of time, I think Australia to have not gone down, firstly to have won the WTC and then not gone down when they were consistently slapped around the face for weeks and weeks, right? If you take from sort of Stokes's final afternoon at Lord's, which signposted what was to come, Australia had a good day and a bit at Leeds, but then they were pummeled, and then Old Trafford was a video nasty for Australia, in truth. And then at the Oval as well, they somehow managed to still be standing going at tea on day 5 of the 5th, on the 25th day of this thing. That's an extraordinary achievement in the face of not just this Stokes experiment really coming to fruition, but also the power of crowds as well, right? We were here for 5 days. You can't underestimate that. You can't underestimate the energy that gives to the players, and especially a bunch of quicks who are out on their feet. And so to withstand it and repel it all the way through to about 5:30 on the final day is a massive achievement, really. And they'll be hurting a bit this morning with Australia because they will say, okay, England were 140 for 7 at Leeds, and one more good hour, and we win the series 3-something, or maybe 4-something, or maybe 5. Nonetheless, considering the overall story, I think, from Zak Crawley's first drilled cover drive to Stuart Broad's, self-scripted finale, I think Australia have done really well to get out of that one with a 2-2. And look, they still have the thing, that funny little brown thing. They still have it.
Joe, Matt, what should we make of Australia's series? In a way, 2-2 seems a missed opportunity. But on the other hand, it's hard to pick that many Australians in a combined 11 or Australians who sort of rose up to the top of their game other than Khawaja and Stark. So in that way, 2-2 kind of feels pretty generous to them. But they were half an hour away from winning the series 3-1.
Yeah, and I think the test we've just had summed up the series, really. There were so many points where, it felt like both sides were out of it. I was here on Saturday as a punter when England just creamed the ball around all day. And it felt like triumphant that day. As an England fan, as I was on that day, it felt like a triumphant occasion. You went away almost feeling like England had won the match. And then by kind of the end of the day's play the following day, it felt like they might well lose it. By the rain break yesterday, it felt like they probably would lose it. And that was indicative of the series as a whole. And as Mel was going through some of the storylines we've had over the last 5-6 weeks, maybe there is a bit of recency bias involved, but I can't remember a series which has had so many different storylines on and off the pitch. And I think part of it as well has been the number of protagonists. So I was looking up the stats yesterday. We've had only 5 people took a 5-wicket haul. No one took more than 1. Only 7 century makers. No one scored more than 1. It felt like every game, almost every innings, there was a new person who came along. And that's so much more interesting than, Steve Smith is clearly masterful at what he does, but just watching him score 100 after 100 whilst other Australians don't contribute that much is not that interesting. Whereas this felt like every match, every innings had something different to offer, a different player doing things in a different way. And that's partly typical of the cricket that we see now. But I think it was also just the fact that we had 2 very evenly matched sides up against each other. But I think if you had said to Australia at the start, you're going to keep the earn, it's going to be 2-2, and Smith's going to average 38, Labuschagne 32, Cummins 38 with the ball, I think they'd snap your hand off for that. I think they've done well to get away with this. It does feel a little bit like a kind of inverse 2009 when England were very lucky to win that series. And statistically, when you look back on it, it's like, how did that happen? I think this is going to feel a bit the same. How did Australia get away with a 2-2 draw here? We all know the answer. Rain at Old Trafford.
Last time around, that there were only two players of the match, I think, weren't there? Across the whole thing. It was Ben Stokes and Steve Smith basically swapped player of the match awards for each of them.
Yeah,
that would have been the case. Yeah, because Stokes would have probably taken it at Lords and Headingley. Right?
Yeah, he did. And Smith got it at Old Trafford, and I think here
at Edgbaston for sure.
Edgbaston,
and I can't remember the Oval.
Can't remember who it would have been.
The Forgotten Test.
Joe Denley's 94 and all that. The Mel was right to pick out Chris Woakes, who's player of the series, having only played 3 Test matches. He's now a double World Cup winner and the player of the series in an epic Ashes series. He was an afterthought really at the start of the summer, but ever since he came into the team, he's been brilliant. Phil, you've always known that Chris Woakes is an excellent sportsman. You've exchanged many a battle with him over the years.
And other cliches. I can't believe he said it was his finest day on the sports field. I can't believe that.
As you walked in with your snooker cue this morning, I wondered if you've got a celebratory match lined up.
We have penciled something in. 17 of his wickets were. This is a Gardner stat, obviously. I've only just found it out. 17 of his 19 wickets were batters, all rounders, and keepers. Absolutely no question that he's the player of the series for England. And we were talking about it an hour or so before the close, as Broad was just finishing off, putting a ribbon round his own career. And there was no question that it should have been Woakes. Mark Wood brought the thunder and the sort of the immediate highlights package and the fear, for sure. One or two players weren't quite the same after that Headingley first morning. But Woakes really did hoover up, and his performance yesterday.
I've never seen him bowl better for England than yesterday. I don't think. I think that's the best. Consistently to keep coming back. He was bowling sharp.
Yeah,
he looked dangerous all the way through. When other England bowlers didn't look particularly threatening, he still continued to look threatening, I thought.
Yeah, I guess he'd probably quietly, modestly, and slightly bashfully point to his average at home of 21 with the ball or whatever it is and say, I have had one or two other days out.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But what he's not tended to have, at least in my addled memory, is a dominant one-man show in a real monster big game. You know, he had that amazing game at Lords where he took a fifer and made 100, but it was in such a weirdly one-sided game that it kind of lacked a little bit of theatre, I suppose. But yesterday we were looking around beforehand, and I was working with one fella, and he said it's Woakes' day. Woakes 8 for 57 is what he actually said. Woakes 8 for 57 today, and it could well have been right. You know, if Broad hadn't said, "Excuse me, officer, you know, this is my time," then he'd have walked off with a 5 or 6. When you're bowling as well as that, you can just bowl forever. And you don't feel the tiredness, you don't feel the legs. And
he almost did. I remember me and Joe, we were sitting next to each other, and you said fairly early on, England are going to win this. And I said, yeah, but who are going to bowl the overs when Woakes stops? Because Jimmy Anderson, who turned 41 during the Test match, Stokes became increasingly reluctant to hand him the ball. Mark Wood was way down on pace. Moeen, who had an excellent final session, he was nursing an injured groin and we didn't see him in the first innings. Stuart Broad actually had a pretty quiet first innings, so it wasn't actually that clear who Stokes was trusting. And I think before this Test match, I didn't actually really buy the chat about England getting the better of the conditions over the series. I thought that England batted under the darkness at Edgbaston, and when it was really dark at Manchester, they had to bowl their spinners. And Australia did bat when it was cloudy more often, but I thought that was a consequence of batting at half the run rate that England scored at. They were literally just out there for more, so we're going to get it cloudier than more. But this time, I think the conditions were massively came to England's aid. First, we've got to say the ball change late on day 4 that Ricky Ponting wants an investigation for Australia. England handed a way newer ball after the ball thudded
So that's
helmet.
I suppose that's sort of conditions. That's just a big mistake by the umpires, isn't it? Really?
It is. Like the pictures show a much newer ball replacing a ball that was 38 overs old. And then also, I thought with the rain delay as well, it meant that Woakes could bowl 2 really long spells against Australia's top 7 that he probably wouldn't have been able to do.
It definitely felt like there was a bit more life in the pitch after the rain break as well, didn't it? As well as giving them a breather. They just looked a different bowling attack. I thought everyone bowled brilliantly after that break.
There was more life in everything. There was more life in the pitch. There was more life.
The crowd had sunk a few more pints as well.
There was much more life. I got to say, I thought, this is heading for a draw, or maybe Australia winning. Absolutely felt that. I felt the prospect of rain again and a draw. I was already feeling so flat. I was getting real Manchester vibes all over again, and everything lifted from that point. It was funny. We did sort of talk to a few people afterwards, and the ball was obviously not welcome by Australia, the ball change. I do, and obviously it was a mistake. But you do see ball changes. There've been a lot of ball changes in this series, and it's in some ways a bit of dumb luck normally as to what they're going to do. Right? Australia got a good one at Headingley that was useful to them. Sometimes you change it and you end up in a worse position. It was sort of something really ironic that, a couple of things, but that it was the ball hitting Khawaja on the helmet that actually forced the change. I mean, it wasn't like England forced it by doing anything nefarious. I don't think it would have happened. And they had been absolutely...
They've been trying every other over to get a new ball. But it wasn't... That's just what always happens, right? But also they've been doing everything they absolutely could to get the ball reversing. So that they absolutely lathered it all over the place. Well, and one thing that someone in the Australian camp sort of said to me too is with the ball changes, the balls that come in have been bowled to wear them down to the particular number of overs, but they're not hit.
Is that right?
That's what I was told, which I hadn't heard that before.
By that token, then, the likelihood that you're going to exchange one ball that's been bowled for 30 overs for one that's been bowled for 30 overs but not hit and not scuffed, the chances of you therefore getting a better ball to work with are exponentially higher, right?
You're not going to get a worse one. It's only going to be better.
No doubt, it's objectively a bit of a madness what happened yesterday with the ball or the day before with the ball, no question. And Ponting, while an investigation sounds a little bit over the top, he's right that I think some sort of clarification, some sort of answer is required here because we all saw the photographs and we all saw the difference in the ball. All I would add is that England was still bowling with what seemed to be like a magic cricket ball. They were still bowling with it. So how many overs did that final innings take up? So 94 overs, and they think they changed the ball after 30.
So at the very least, it's nearly 60 overs off.
So it's a magic ball that the umpires have either unwittingly, corruptively, allegedly, or just incompetently, just blindly said, "Oh, this one will do." But it was still going, and they had 15 overs with it past the point where they could have picked up the second or brackets third new ball, and England chose not to. So they happened to get like this magical sphere,
and the carry
that took 10 for 200.
The carry that Broad was getting at the very end was amazing. So one, that speaks to the hardness of the ball, which we don't really know how old it was, but it must be at least 60, 70 overs old. But number two, we talked about it on one of the daily shows, the quality of the pitch as well. We saw a lot of slow pace in the pitches early on in the series, but here for the ball to be flying through to Bairstow at shoulder height off a length at the very, very end of day 5 is quite something. Mel, I completely agree with what everyone said about Australia at the start, but how much of a missed opportunity was it in that England picked a pretty weird side for this game in that they picked all of the old seamers again for back-to-back test matches where there's a minuscule turnaround. This was a real opportunity to get big first innings runs and to really wear down that England bowling attack at some point in the game. They threatened to do that at points in the second innings, but they didn't quite do it. And this series has felt like almost a referendum for how this era of Australian Test cricket is going to be remembered. And the great sides probably do beat this England bowling attack in the 5th Test match. Do you think it was a massive missed opportunity for them?
I think it'll be seen that way, certainly in some quarters. And there are already some knives out I've seen this morning about you suggesting that it's almost a failure in a missed opportunity. Look, there are a couple of things. I did feel right from Edgbaston at times, whether it was from field placings or at times the way they were batting, like the way that Marnus batted here on day 2 was just weird for me. I've never seen, I can't recall seeing Marnus bat like that. I can't recall many Australian sides sort of going down that road. So, because it was different to what you would say was your normal attritional cricket. This was first innings at the Oval in when you're up 2-1 in a series. So that sort of seemed a bit odd, and it reinforced this thing at times when I felt that this series has happened to Australia a lot of the times during the game, and the way that England played was happening to Australia, and it was was making them maybe make decisions that they wouldn't normally make or play in ways they normally wouldn't. For all we're concentrating on what we do and not worrying about England can play how they were. There was at times a sense that they kept saying, that we know they're going to come hard at us, but that's going to offer us opportunities. And I do wonder if sometimes they were waiting for opportunities rather than creating them. That there were lots of times during the series I felt that. The other thing, you talk about combined 11, and must have been the hip thing to be chatting about yesterday, because I had that conversation with a few people in this test match. And if you were to name your best combined 11 before this series started, and your best combined 11 after the series finished, I think it would look quite different. And only the only players who enhance their reputation, I think Usman Khawaja enhances his reputation going back. I think Mitchell Starc he did go for runs, but he obviously was the go-to wicket taker again, the strike bowler. I think Mitch Marsh did. When you talk about unusual storylines, that was the one for Australia. Mitch Marsh, he was joking to me that he was the 16th man of the tour. And
yet even that storyline almost slipped under the radar in the match that he did it.
I know, it's crazy. So look, I think it'll be. It feels so meaningless to me retaining the urn. That's just me. Everyone has different opinions on it. Understand it. Don't have a problem with it. But it sort of feels a little bit meaningless to me. He had said that you couldn't help but get away from the fact that teams and captains are often defined by their legacy is defined by ashes away. And I asked him about that last night, and he said, what will be your legacy from this tour? And he said, I think we should be very proud. So they're obviously going to be feeling that way. It just did feel a little bit 2019-ish, but just without a glowering, really angry Justin Langer marching around giving death steps.
In 4 years' time, when we go around again, that will be 26 years.
26 years, yeah.
Which is the longest period that any Ashes side has gone without winning the urn away from home in history.
Wow.
So that's the context of it. Which, if you'd said that to the teenage you, Joe,
it would have seemed absolutely ridiculous.
And
at that stage, the fact that England would win more than one game in a series seemed ridiculous.
Is that partly because because England have been absolutely mauled in Australia?
Right.
How long's it been since they won a test?
What, in Australia?
A test match.
10-11.
10-11,
yeah,
right?
Sydney.
So that's why, and whereas the series over here have felt closer, and maybe that's one of the reasons that it does seem so shocking.
Just on Mel's point about Australia seeming kind of quite passive in this series, I agree with that. But that is true of every opponent that England have had under McCullum and Stokes. And it's very hard to look anything different to that unless you kind of fight fire with fire. And then that's exactly what England want you to do. So it's part of the genius of the bounce ball thing, because it leaves you very little place to go. And it'll be absolutely fascinating to see what happens in India, because England will continue to play the same way, we presume. Although I think it's actually interesting that we've got this big gap. England have had a lot of Test cricket in a short period of time. They talk about being almost like a club side. They've been together all the time. They now disappear off. There's a World Cup. Can you come back to play in India, the hardest place to play cricket in the world, and just continue to play like you were 5 months previously? They'll do their best, I'm sure, but I do think some of the aura might have kind of dissipated by then. But then also, what do India do in response? I mean, India just prepare Bunsen's and just hope that England fall into that trap, and there's every chance that they will. But if it does come off, even in short periods of time, will we see India continue to play on the back foot and end up seeming quite passive in the way that Australia have here?
Obviously, we can probably do about 6 months in the build up to the India tour, so it's not for now. But I'm really interested to see if they do, as we expect, prepare really juicy spinning tracks. England will go this way. They'll play their shots. They'll run down the track. They'll run past a few. And I think that's the best way to go, because if they play old-style English Test cricket, prodding around with 4 men round the bat against Jadeja, Ashwin et al., then they'll just come unstuck.
We know it doesn't work.
We know it doesn't work.
And also going back to 2021, even though it didn't work for England on the pitches that turned loads, there were moments where those kind of things did work. So Moeen scored like 43 off 16 in what was the first of at least 3 last Moeen Test matches for England. And then like Lawrence hit like a 48 from number 7, playing the specialist number 7, playing that way as well.
Sorry, in this conversation, it reminded me of a line that Robinson said early on in the series after the Edgbaston defeat. And he said, and I've just found it, just got it up. Of course, it sounds weird because Australia won the game at Edgbaston, but if they're honest with themselves, they'll look at themselves and realise they need to change their approach to keep up with how we're going to play. And then he said, if there's any movement in the pitch at Lords, the way we're playing compared to them is going to benefit us. Now, he got a load of grief for that because, you're saying that after a defeat. But there's a lot of logic and a lot of sense in that. And I think now that point, which was obviously would have been just echoed from what they've been saying in the dressing room, I think that now actually does stand up. And I think Australia's passivity kept them in the contest, but they were staggering through the last 2 weeks. The last 2 games, it's been hard yakka for them. And they were just about on their feet, but you could almost sense they were almost sitting on their stool in the corner as well, being slapped around by their own cutsman and trainer, saying, look, just keep going, hold them at bay as best you possibly can, And in the end, they fell over right at the last, at the end of a grueling 8-week tour. It's much harder for the travelling team than the home team as well. But Robinson's theory is right. And if England can hold that idea, and they will, no doubt, and take it into India, then they'll have more of a chance of putting up a scrap, I think, than if they'd done it in the old way.
All of our Ashes moments of the week are brought to you by our dapper partners, Charles Tyrwhitt. The British menswear brand know a thing or two about looking sharp, so whether you're heading to the cricket, off to the beach, or even working from the office, they have looks for every dress code. For 20% off, shop online at charlestyrwhitt.com and use the promo code Wisden23. When Steve Waugh scored his last ball of the day 100 at the SCG 20-odd years ago, Mark Nicholas said on commentary, that was the most sensational piece of individually constructed cricketing theatre that I've ever seen. Now, Mark Nicholas was here at the Kia Oval for the last 2 days.
In his pundit shoes. They're everywhere.
And I think it's fair to say that Stuart Broad might have outdone Steve Waugh. Broad taking the final wicket is our Charles Tyrwhitt moment of the week. Joe, it was just the most fitting way possible for Stuart Broad to go. A man who raised his game for the Ashes, taking the final 2 wickets to seal that result with the crowd in South London going mental. An amazing moment that will be replayed on loop for years to come. Yeah,
it was both. You couldn't make it up, but also, blindingly obvious that's what was going to happen. I saw on the Channel 4 News when I got back last night, a rather tongue-tied Monty Panesar being interviewed outside the ground and said the thing with Stuart, he just wanted everyone to make a big fuss over him, which is, I don't think Monty meant to say that much, but he basically did get to the nub of it, I think. There was a bit of grumbling around the timing of it, a bit, look at me, at a time when there was other stuff going on. And I can understand that to a degree, but I do think yesterday, and actually I've noticed Barney Ronay wrote in The Guardian that he felt actually this was distracting from England's bids to win the match, to draw the series. I thought yesterday it helped England. I think after the weather, the break, it could have easily gone very, very flat, but actually there was something more on it. And Broad had as he does, had created that himself. Obviously the fact he comes on and finishes it himself as well only adds to the drama. But I thought
I think that's a bit generous, personally.
I knew you would do.
I think without Chris Woakes' opening spell, Broad bowled like a drain, by the way, with the new ball on day 4, and wasn't particularly impressive with the second new ball early on in the day. Without Woakes' intervention, you wouldn't really had a game to play with. Broad fluffed his lines initially. If we're making it the Broad day, he was anonymous until the last hour, and he cleaned up with a couple of.
But I think there was more around the event itself. There was more in the crowd. There was more anticipation of what would happen, rather than it being a match that actually, in some ways, didn't matter that much to people.
But we were all here.
Obviously, it wouldn't happen without Woakes bowling like the way he did.
But I think Woakes created the atmosphere because through his brilliance. I think if Australia were 200 for 1, then all the pomp and ceremony around Broad from the day before would have felt almost awkward, right? If Australia had won the game by 6 or 7 wickets, as they could have done, then suddenly it looks like a rather awkward thing. I think it flowed from Woakes rather than anything else.
I basically agree with both of you. I think it was really
convenient.
flat. I think it was really flat at the rain delay, and it was just that Moeen Woakes burst that kind of got the crowd going. But there was also another bit where it felt a little bit too much like Edgbaston for England's liking when Murphy looked great, by the way. What a test match with a bat, as much as anything else.
Quality cricketer.
He looks really, really, really good.
His reputation is enhanced.
Definitely. And there was a moment where I felt like, hang on, this feels a little bit too close to Edgbaston. And then Broad coming on does raise the crowd and the energy and all the energy around them. And also it was fitting in so many ways, but also fitting that it was to 3 left-handers at the end, which is what Broad's strength is now. And with this ancient ball that was still moving, Broad got the ball to talk in a way that I don't think any English bowler could at that point in the game.
I think so. Just to make the point that I'm not saying Broad created everything yesterday, but I think this match ended up being an occasion that it wouldn't have been if Stuart Broad hadn't made that announcement during the game. That's not to take anything away from Woakes and Moeen and the way they bowled, because obviously Broad wouldn't have had his opportunity without them. But I think this match felt more significant because of Broad's mid-game retirement.
It's funny how it plays, though, isn't it? Because Moeen Ali announced his retirement last night. Correct?
Sort of seemed like a bit reluctantly, and then Stokes said we're going to have a conversation. But yeah, he did.
Right.
He did.
Okay. Moeen Ali tore the heart out of Australia's middle order, and Broadie, bless him, came in and nicked off a couple of lefties when the game was basically won. Moeen Ali and Stuart Broad, they're both great servants of English cricket for 10, 15 years and more. They've both gone out here in glory, and one's actually had a genuine effect on the innings, and the other one has adorned it and finished it off. And yet we all know who's going to be on the front and back pages.
Absolutely, but also I would say Broad, we will never see play cricket again. Moeen's career, he's a white ball cricketer, almost more than red ball cricketer.
The Phoenix, when do the Phoenix start? Tomorrow? Is it tomorrow? No. Look, I hear you. He'll hopefully be at the World Cup. Yeah, and
also he's retired a couple of times before, so we've got used to this.
What I would say too is, remember he did tell the team the night before when they came out and batted brilliantly, and I do wonder if there was even maybe there was a sense of buoyancy there. I don't know, but they all knew that whole day, didn't they? That he was leaving and it was going to be a send off. So I don't know that, but no other cricketer that I can think of, maybe Virat Kohli. At times, but I don't think even him as well. No one understands the theatre of cricket. We were actually, when we were having a few beers in a park because all the pubs were closed last night. So that was
in a churchyard, Melinda.
It was a park by a churchyard, sitting on the kids' playground equipment, drinking cans like proper. It's
a glamorous job.
Yeah, exactly. But it was sort of talking about whether or not Lin-Miranda Manuel could basically write Stuart Broad the musical, because he's proper, and what that would look like, because he's proper theatrical. Everything from stop moving the robot to the headband to just everything. There's so many to the not, when he didn't walk, that I just could not believe that he changed the bails around and got a wicket the next ball. Forget about the magic ball that came in and did all sorts of things. What about the magic bails? That was absolutely pure Stuart Broad, and it could only be him that would do something like that to take that
I think the bails is the truest mark of his genius of all the things, and you can line them up. You can list them, but I think the bails is beyond.
But
beyond genius.
The best bit of it was him saying, "Oh, it's an Australian thing," and the end of the fifth is actually I think I might have made that up.
It's just amazing. He's absolutely genius. He's also the best English player at winding up Australians. He's got an absolute genius gift for it. No one else does it quite the same way. But it's amazing.
I think there's something about fathers and sons in this. he grew up in an Ashes house. He grew up as an infant. He would have been aware of Ashes folklore. There'd probably, possibly, allegedly have been a big photo of his dad with his Duncan Fernley raised at Perth as one of the 300s he made in 86-7. So it's not just in the blood, but it's in your formative years. Your understanding of who you are in the world and how much naturally you take from your parents is already ingrained. And so it feels commonplace. It feels like you're just carrying on the family business. And so psychologically, that puts you at a position of great, your chances are enhanced immediately, I think. And then obviously there are other great factors that have gone to play within him. And you can't create that psychology, but it certainly gives you a head start. And just as his dad was a punchy cricketer who thrived against the Aussies, especially, and was known as a combustible character, so his son has shaved off some of the spikier elements of his dad, but maintained some of the punchier, more competitive sides.
I mean, I genuinely mean this as a compliment, but Broad taken 604 Test wickets, and I genuinely don't really know what he's good at. Like, he's 6'6" and doesn't get that much bounce. He didn't have an away swinger until he had 588 Test wickets. He's never been rapid, but yet he's had a 16-year Test career. He raises his game in the Ashes. It's like so few English cricketers actually do that. Like, even the greats, the modern greats of English cricket. Anderson averages 36 against Australia. Cook never got a home 100. Root's overall average against Australia is quite a lot below
Cook had quite a good series away from
that is
home,
true.
I should add.
But over the course, Broad has been pretty consistently good against Australia, even in phases of his career where he otherwise wasn't actually that successful. His first major success was against Australia. Even in his late 30s, when he wasn't doing that much elsewhere, he was still having good Ashes series. It is the ultimate thinker and tinkerer, really. I mean,
and the master of reinvention, right?
Yeah.
And also gives the best press conferences. They are so funny. And he, on more than one occasion, he's conducted them himself. He did it the other night. He does it plenty of times. If the media manager's not around, he comes in and wants to go on with it. I think
he's conducting them all himself, whether we know it or not. I think he's pulling the strings.
I've never come away from a Stuart Broad interview or press conference, and this goes to your point about him being a thinker. I've always learned stuff, always, every single time, because he clearly is a thinker, and he's really good at expressing it. He's mulled all of the things over in his mind.
In one of his post-match interviews yesterday, I think it was with Sky, might have been with TMS. He was given an opening question that was quite open, and within 2 minutes, sort of unprompted, he's talking about like the data he received by the Notts analyst about his record against left-handers, which I think is an insight. Anyway, I asked all three of you to come up with a favourite Broad memory. Mel, do you want to start us off?
Well, if we're talking, there are so many great memories. But if we're talking about a spell, because that's what he was, right? He was the bowler of great spells. That's how I always think of Stuart Broad, these magic spells. And I just have to go 2015, Trent Bridge, because that was everything. That was conditions suiting him. It was at Trent Bridge. It was against Australia. It was a huge Ashes moment. And it was the theatre I was talking about. It involved one of the great Ashes slips catches from Ben Stokes, or was he technically Gully maybe? But it was the Oh My Broad. And that was the pure theatre of the man, that one of the great images that I'll remember. And I'm just going to chuck in, it's an off-field thing, because I went back to the first piece I ever wrote about him when I was working for cricket.com.au, and they didn't want me to do a Stuart Broad piece, but it was the end of that miserable whitewash series in Australia. And I wrote a piece that with the title, Is Broad Really a Shit Bloke? And it was a whole piece devoted to proving that he wasn't, and included the fact that he and Matt Pryor talked a man down from a bridge in Sydney during the last test. And it was all this, I'd forgotten it. So, you know, I go back to sort of that series and some things he did off the field that made me like him from the start.
Joe?
Mel talked about magic spells. Mine was the first of his for England, really. 2009. I thought of it immediately maybe because it was all here as it was yesterday. A game that England needed to win to claim back the Ashes. Australia cruising, and he takes 5 for in no time and effectively, sets up the game for them to win the match in the series. I think the most interesting thing about that is where Broad was at that point in his career. Where he is now, it's easy to look back and think he was the blue-eyed boy and it all happened easily for him, but it didn't at all at the start of his Test career. Just the stats earlier, that was after 21 matches before he played that Oval Test. He was averaging 38 with the ball. I mean, you're actually lucky still to be in the side at that point. England bowlers would not still be playing in the Test side if they averaged 38 after 21 games now. It's taken 2 fifers, but both are coming innings defeats, the hammering at Kingston and the previous game at Headingley. So he hadn't actually had a particularly big impact for England. Obviously, it had the getting hit for 6 sixes by Yuvraj in the T20 World Cup a couple of years earlier to that. So we were yet to see, despite all the hype, all the talk about Broad and what he was going to become, we hadn't seen that much of him at that point. And this was the first time where he showed, first of all, how much he relishes Ashes, how much he relishes the big occasion. 5 for 37 in an unbroken 12-over spell. And I would look back at the Cricinfo report just to kind of remind myself of it. And just to show, despite all the reinventions, some things never change. Peter English wrote in his report, Broad was so confident he ran down the pitch without turning to the umpire for approval until late in his follow-through. It was after getting Watson LBW. So
the birth of the celebrity.
Yeah, so that was...
We hadn't even mentioned celebrity appeals once, like in the whole thing yet. Gee, he's given us so much.
Phil?
Joburg 2016. I was there for it. And that was the tour. I think that was the tour. They lost the first game, Joe, right?
Yeah.
And they were in a bit of trouble. Cook's captaincy had come under a bit of scrutiny, and Cook himself was struggling for form. This was the end of 2016, early 17, I think.
15, 16, I think.
15, 16
was this when they lost the first test? Compton got a few runs, but it was pretty drab stuff.
Yeah. So obviously Cape Town was a draw. They'd lost the first. And it was a nip and tuck game. And then Broad picked the ball up in the third innings and just ran through their top order. He took the first 6 wickets to fall. He got AB for a blob, caught off the inside edge. Bairstow took a good catch. Just running through the team, Elgar, Amler, De Villiers, De Plessis, Bavuma.
These were the James Taylor catches as well, weren't they?
Right, yeah. And he was just irresistible. And it was one of those moments where he had the pitch and the moment and the, as we say, the theatre series on the line, needed to get back into it, and he just did what he tended to do. He was a bowler of, a bit like Peterson with the bat. He's a bowler of great spells. As Peterson was a player of great innings rather than an all-time great, Broad was a bowler of great spells, had great matches rather than an all-timer. When you talk about the great fast bowlers, he's probably in the second category, as you alluded to earlier, but undoubtedly a bowler of all-time great spells, and that was one of them. Let me have a look. 6 for 17 in 12 overs. They won that game and went on to win the series. I think
the man who took the most wickets in that final session, though, was Moeen Ali. He left the field arm in arm with Broad. He later confirmed that he was also retiring from Test cricket. I think it's at least the 3rd time that Moeen has retired from
well,
Test
that's
cricket.
quite good news then, right? Because England could do with him in India. So hopefully this is just part 3.
He'll be very handy, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
As much for the bat as anything else.
I think
they need to find a compo package for him, because apparently his SAT20 contract is massive. Hence why he's saying, yeah, thanks for no thanks. I'm not playing that silly Red Bull nonsense. But yeah, the ECB need to dig deep.
You use the word servant to describe Moeen and Broad.
Did I?
And I think Moeen...
edit that out.
Moeen is... I think there's a very real humility to him in that he's basically done every role that England asked of him over the course of basically a decade. But I think particularly this series, he was living a very easy, comfortable life, playing, Abu Dhabi T10 1 minute, Bangladesh Premier League the next. Probably spends 2 months a year as Butler's right-hand man for the white ball team. And crucially, away from the scrutiny that he got when he was a Test cricketer. And he's batted literally everywhere from 1 to 9 from England. His best statistical position, by the way, is number 4, which also happens to be the position where he batted least in out of the 9 positions. He played so little first-class cricket before this summer. He fills in the gaps at 3 and with the lead spinner. And he must have known there was a reasonable chance that it would go pear-shaped and he'd get pelters. And I think to do all of that, it felt like he wasn't as appreciated as he should be, and he probably wouldn't get the farewell that he deserved. And I thought it was really, really cool that he did get that moment, especially when we thought at the start of the Test match that he wasn't going to bowl again. He didn't bowl in the first innings. He was limping when he was batting in the first innings. So I thought that was really, really special.
My personal favourite moment of the final day was the Mitch Marsh wicket, where Moeen ragged one inside edge off the pad, and Bairstow, almost in spite of himself, just saw it. And all those past deeds, the muscle memory kicked in, and he just, flopped underneath it.
It was an amazing catch.
It's a brilliant catch. And for all the grief that Johnny Bairstow's received, much of it, as he says, unfairly, it was just a really good moment where two kind of aging stalwarts of the setup, if you like, combined, and that was quite a critical moment in the game as well, because Marsh is obviously a dangerous player, and that was my personal favourite moment, really. I'm so glad that Moeen had a day out, because he deserved it. As you say, it took a bit of courage to come back, then to put his hand up to bat 3, played nicely at Manchester. That was a great afternoon for him. And
there were a lot of doubters at every step. Like when he came into the side, there were a lot of doubters going, this is now getting silly. You can't get this guy out. And then when he's
not round here, Mel. We were club
believers.
mode. We were club mode the whole way.
I'm not sure Butch was. If we're talking about us, our
Oh
team.
yeah.
Oh, come on, that's royalty you're talking about.
But and then
did you ask him about going out with Jagger?
Oh shit, I didn't.
Oh mate, phone him back.
That's for next week. That's for next week's.
Mark Butcher went out with Mick Jagger over the course of the Oval Test match.
Oh, that will be perfect for our English sparkling wine roundup of the Ashes next week, won't it?
Moments of the series.
But like even when Mo's finger fell apart, and then everyone was like, "Well, that's what you get for picking as someone who hasn't played Test cricket." Thank goodness for Monica Honey.
That's my favourite story of the summer. That one, because the wife of a cricket fan sent him the honey, and he kept her details, and he lost it. He put the because it was a letter. Lost the letter, put it on his kitchen table to respond to her at the end of the series. Lost the letter, and finally, obviously, social media did its thing. But
then when his groin went too, I mean, that was, you had a groin strain, just everything along. That thing about the philosophy, the whole Bazball thing, and backing players, it actually came to fruition quite a bit, including with Johnny Bairstow.
And then Bairstow, by the end, still, you'd have to say it's a mixed series. He dropped catches that cost England dearly at the start. But overall, by the end, he's had a good series with the bat. He's averaging 40, and he's taken those catches at the end, which are kind of going to be the kind of prevailing memory, I think, of that final test.
Two of the key they could have been the 2 key dropped catches in the series were Ben Stokes. Can you believe? At Edgbaston, and he admitted that was the only thing he said he would have changed after the Manchester washout. But I mean, this is how many things happen in this series. I'd almost forgotten that. That was one of the reasons I thought, we're headed for a draw or Australia win, because he just dropped Smith off Mo, and it was like, I can't believe it's going to be the end of the fairy tale. Mo coming back, and
Ben Stokes drops the Ashes.
Drops the Ashes. Wow, so much.
Gulliver's Sports Travel are inviting you to explore India and experience the ICC Men's Cricket World Cup 2023 this October and November. Be part of the action with one of their tours that can include guaranteed official tickets, accommodation, stadium transfers, flights, and more. To find out more information, visit their website, gulliverstravel.co.uk, or call them on 01684 878 937, or head to the link in the description of this podcast.
A few listener questions. Oliver asks, of all the innings this series, Phil, which would you best describe as having been strummed?
Oh, right, I see. Okay. That's a silly question. Zak
Can't talk to our listeners like that.
No, just Zak Crawley 73 from 76 was the definition of strumming it, as I see it, and apparently it's my word. So it's the definition of it. He was totally effortless, and married up all of the good things with a degree of measured composure, which is the thing that's been lacking up until now. You saw it, Joe, as a punter, right? And probably when you are a punter and you're there in the ground, you get more of a sense of it. It's a funny thing watching. People won't really believe this, and I'm certainly not whinging, right? But when you're in the press box, especially at the Oval, the view is concealed a little by this ugly sort of dark window.
It is dark in there.
And it's hard to get a sense, really, of what you're witnessing, especially if you're not listening with an earpiece, listening to what the commentary is saying. As a punter, what was that like to see?
Crawley's innings specifically, I mean, I said to you yesterday, I thought he batted better in that innings than he did in the big one at Old Trafford. He just looked so assured all the way through. He didn't look like playing the silly shot to get out. Even when Duckett went off like a train, sometimes Crawley gets a bit overexcited and sort of tries to keep up. But actually, he played kind of quite contained for a little while, let Duckett play most of the shots. I think that is obviously the Crawley that we all want him to be. Not just the player who comes out and plays an extraordinary knock every 15 test matches. That looked like a very repeatable thing for him to do. And that's the most encouraging thing, I think, from the series. Also, as a slip cat, I know he dropped one hard chance yesterday, but he looks like the best slip fielder England have had for a long time.
Hick, right? And two big blokes with two big wingspans.
You'd go back that far, would you?
I can't remember. I mean, Flintoff was good for a few years before the captaincy got in the way. Swan was okay. Swan was good. Yeah, it was good.
Just Gothic was solid, but yeah.
But Hick would be your second slip, and he was superb. But he's as good as it gets. Cook was always a first slip and an okay first slip. Now's the time. Would you, and on behalf of you and Ben, would you like to give a public apology to Zak Crawley, who you've written off about half a dozen times every week for the last 3 years?
100%.
Okay, good. Now go on. The floor is yours.
Well, yeah, go on, do it. Apologise.
I got that badly wrong. Zak Crawley had an amazing series. He
didn't hear at the back, so just say it.
I mean, I at the start of the series didn't want him in the side. I would have opened with, I said it on the show, I'd have opened with Stokes and got Folks in there. But Crawley had an incredible series. And I think that the England management, to flip this a little bit, deserve incredible credit for backing him, because it was unprecedented, a player doing that badly, to see him backed for that long. I think there were periods where there was such a long gap between those innings occasionally, and he'd go a whole, not just series, but seasons without really showing what we knew he was capable of. Obviously, we've seen what he's capable of ever since he got that 267 in Pakistan, but it almost became a bit of a joke and almost felt awkward bringing that up because it was so long ago. But how England not only stuck by him, but also made him end up in the best mindset he's ever been in for the most important moments was amazing. And I think there are two things about Stokes that I think is remarkable as a captain. Is one, getting the best out of players, but two, getting 20 wickets pretty much every time, regardless of what the bowling and tackle conditions are. And I think to get Crawley into that mindset was probably his most impressive bit of man management.
Yeah, absolutely. I was sort of becoming a bit obsessed by Zak Crawley from at the start of this series, just watching every single shot. And I was trying to think of another player in the game at the moment in Test cricket who played so many beautiful, gorgeous shots that would go for one or none. That sort of almost instinctive reaction where you find yourself going, shot, and you realise just punched it to cover. And it was sort of frustrating me, and I was watching it more and more. And then obviously he rode his luck, and he says he's a big believer of luck at Old Trafford in particular, the start of that monumental innings. But I go back to Old Trafford a year ago during the South African series. I was watching the nets. I've actually got video of it somewhere on my phone. And I was just filming Jimmy Anderson bowling to Zak Crawley. And first ball, I pulled out my camera and filmed, and he just like played and missed, ball clattered into the stumps. And you know how they play music at Brendan Baz loves playing music at training. And the song that was playing at the time was I Want to Know What Love Is. It was this mournful thing. I want to know what love is as Jimmy runs in, the
that's
stumps
good.
go flying. And in the end, that's all Zak needed. He just needed to be shown what love is.
That's really good.
Benjamin asks, can you please name your starting 11 for India, please?
Oh.
Now, I don't have the mental space. I can promise you that we will devote literally probably a full day, full 24 hours at least of podcasting over the next 6 months that is just about like who
there won't be a spinner in England who we won't have mentioned by January. We can promise you that.
If you got a guy bowling well in your club team, let us know and they'll probably get a shout out.
One thing I might say in the brackets is that Ben Stokes looked pretty useful at 3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I can't believe we've not mentioned that. We've got a gem of an email from Alec, who writes in to say, it's been a really interesting and exciting series, and everyone continues to point out the differing styles, which is part of the reason for it being so good. But no one seems to be pointing out another really obvious and basic factor. It's been a very mid-scoring series, which always makes the best cricket. No one likes 150 versus 140 or 600 plays 550. At the time of writing, this was during the final test match. No one has been skittled for less than 200, and with the exception of England at Old Trafford, has scored more than 416. And that was at 5 and over and ruined by rain. All the completed innings scores, except that one, have been between 224 and 416, which is very consistent over 5 test matches. Cricket is at its best when it's an even battle between bat and ball, and this series has proved that once again. That is an excellent point that doesn't require comment from us, I think. The great email, Alec. Remember, you can always get in touch by sending us an email at podcast@wisden.com. In the next issue of Wisden Cricket Monthly, there is a feature where we'll include people who've got in touch with us who are either new or returning to the game, telling us why they fell in love with the Ashes this summer, and a little bit about whether or not they'll stick at it and what it was that drew them into it. Is that a fair summary?
That is a fair summary. I was going to say this is men's and women's Ashes as well. So yeah, whichever series grabbed you, or maybe both, we want to hear from you. I am putting this together pretty soon, so get writing.
Send them in.
But also, I think we can say, the best ones, even if they don't make it in the mag, we'll read out a couple more in the podcast.
Yeah,
next week.
And we'll read one out now. Actually, this is from my flatmate, who
this is nepotism, isn't it?
Who I can attest basically hated cricket before this summer. So he wrote saying, before this summer, I was wholly uninvolved in the cycle of Test cricket and had effectively self-excluded myself from a cricketing family. I've got 2 younger brothers who are both enthusiastic and superior to me on the field itself. I always found ways to write cricket off as elitist, disconnected from the world, and slow-moving for the spectator. To my brother's mixture of glee and anger, I've been drawn back in, ultimately to the point of near obsession by this summer's Ashes series. The key figure has been Ben Stokes, really, and his ways of looking at the psychology, informing the brand of cricket that England are playing, especially their roots, perhaps in his own courageous and bravely publicised struggle with anxiety and associated mental health struggles. Watching him and the whole team feel empowered to play without fear, remaining unfazed by negative thoughts or the media criticism in tougher moments, along with the questions that might accompany every ball and every shot if they become overwhelming, has been an exhilarating experience and genuinely inspiring as someone prone to this sort of catastrophizing. And apart from anything else, it has been incredible to watch, as exhilarating and immersive a sporting spectacle as I remember. He goes on to list off a few moments from the series, and then he ends off by saying, roll on 2027, which I think is quite telling.
Not interested in the stuff down under then?
No, well, I mean, why would he if England haven't won a test match there in 12 years?
Hey, let's not predict that's going to happen next time.
Moving on away from the Ashes, very briefly, the 100 starts today. Believe it or not, it actually starts today. By the time this pod is out, it would have already have started. There have been several high-profile dropouts in the last few days. Rashid Khan, Elise Perry, Shadab Khan for half of it, Alyssa Healy, Issa Tim Davies going to miss the finish. Most of those players are injured. Rashid Khan is injured, but hasn't yet specified what his injury is, despite quite a few people asking various media people.
And it played in the Major League Cricket final a couple of days ago, which, he might well have got injured in that, but it obviously has...
Bowled a full spell, 3 for
Right,
9.
yeah.
I guess with it starting, we're not going to a preview of it, but if the hundreds mission was to get new people into the game, does it feel a bit irrelevant, Joe, with so many people hooked by both Ashes series, and then you have so many high-profile players from overseas not taking part, but we still don't really know on the men's side of it actually which players from the Ashes we're going to see, and it's also like, if you have just been gripped by cricket for the first time, this is so different to what got you in. It does feel like it occupies quite a strange prominent space in the cricketing summer.
Yeah, and I've always been pretty sceptical about the kind of gateway drug argument, because I think they are so different. So if you do fall for the Ashes, like we've been receiving emails from people, and they're like, "Oh, I want to watch some more cricket. What do I watch?" And then you watch the 100, but probably none of the players who are playing in the Ashes are involved, and it's really different. I'm not saying it can't work, but I'm not sure that it's quite as linear as it's often made out to be. It feels hugely anticlimactic. I think it was always going to after the Ashes this summer. With player dropouts, that doesn't help. I don't think it matters hugely, given the way they're trying to market it. I think it matters more to us than to the people who are going to go along and watch it, probably. But it certainly doesn't help having those players missing. On a personal level, I've looked forward to the 100 to a degree over the last couple of years and been interested in watching it. At this precise moment, I have no interest in watching it whatsoever. I'm sure that will change over the next week or so, but it is a hard sell. Maybe next summer it won't feel like quite such a hard sell if the Test cricket hasn't been quite so captivating. But certainly this moment, it doesn't feel like the ECB's dream of what the 100 should be is coming to fruition.
Have we heard anything regarding England players appearing in?
They'll be assessed over the next couple of days, whatever that means. I'm sure we'll see some of them. But
so they'll be arm twisted as best as the ECB possibly can. Right. Okay. Yeah. Look, without the male players, it's worth pointing out that the female players will be there. But without the male players, it lacks a lot of luster for sure. I also find myself wanting to say there's still going to be 30 more days of international cricket before the end of the summer, right? So this isn't the end. It's an anticlimax, but what wouldn't be, really? It's slightly odd, don't get me wrong. We're watching Surrey's second string warming up out there for their Royal London stuff to kick in this week. You two are on the gig Thursday.
Yep, Leicester at home. And there's also, as we know, that runs concurrently with the 100s. It was always going to feel slightly after the Lord Mayor's show, regardless, I think.
I'm going to my first ever 100 match this week, tomorrow.
Oh, nice. Which game's that?
There you go. That's your answer.
The big one.
No, I know where I'm going, obviously. So I'm going to Lord's. I've been invited to the President's Box. So,
oh, nice.
So because I'm elite. I'm
We'd
part
all
of
be looking forward to that, wouldn't we?
Part of the problem
But,
with the MCC.
Yeah, I'm part of the problem. And I'm going to my first ever one. I mean, you do see in Australia, sometimes the Big Bash does get a bounce off Test cricket. So the first year, I mean, it was all around the pandemic and the captive audience, wasn't it? And then last year was sort of post that. This is going to be the first time it's got a different challenge to deal with off the back of this.
Can we all agree that the standard of the 100 will be slightly higher than the standard of the Blast?
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah,
it will be.
I think
You're condensing the English talent.
Yeah. If the Blast was starting tomorrow, then we'd be compelled to say, and we would find it more natural to say, it's going to be really good for the Blast, isn't it? It's going to be really good. You're going to probably get a few more eyeballs on it. You're going to get a few more bums on seats. But it's going to benefit from the feel-good factor that we've just had, that there's definitely a bit more of a buzz around the game than there was 2 months ago. And so the Blast is going to benefit. Bring on the Blast. We now have another thing, which will be, as we've just agreed, tentatively, that it will be a better standard of cricket. It will also be more on terrestrial TV than the Blast has never been on, as we know. And it will have more, rightly or wrongly, it will have more media heft behind it to capitalise on that bump, that feel-good factor. But because the 100 is such a toxic thing, we automatically have to run it down before we've even seen a ball of it. It's just funny how it plays.
And I think that's fair. And I also think, as you're saying that, I think increasingly it's important to separate the men's and women's hundreds. And I think the women's Ashes is much more likely to have had an impact in terms of the 100 audience, in part because the formats are, they're not the same, obviously, but they're similar. A lot of it has been white ball cricket, and that translates into the 100. And I can see, a young fan goes and watches one of those ODIs or T20s, very exciting game, goes to watch the 100, they can see a connection between the two. Same
heroes as well.
So, yeah, and some of the same characters involved. The men's doesn't feel like that. But Phil's point is fair. It's that... comes back to that kind of lack of affiliation to a county. You watch some cricket. Who's your local team? Who do you go and watch? Is your local team Worcestershire? Is it Surrey? Is it Lancashire? Or is it this team that doesn't sort of really exist and then disappears again a few weeks later?
No, I see your point.
We also know that it's really played out on TV, isn't it? That's where audiences are actually properly marked. Ideally, you get a few through the doors as well.
I see your point about what we've just seen is going to help give it some sort of a boost, but the difference is, comparing it to the Blast, is that the Blast is never the centerpiece of what is on offer for cricket fans. And I think for a month after this, I think it does feel weird that it goes to the 100. If you're, I mean, it's all the talk is about new fans, but if you are already a cricket fan, I think it's a pretty underwhelming month of cricket, given the likely names we're going to see in the men's competition, at least compared to what you normally would get in August if you're a cricket fan, I think.
But apart from the England men's test team, every cricketer in England will be playing cricket.
Yeah, but in August you normally do get the star names of English cricket playing.
Yeah, I mean, ideally they should be.
Yeah.
It's mad that they're not.
Yeah.
But, you understand why up to a point.
To finish the show, we've got a great email in from Andy, who says, I hope that you're among your review of the Ashes and the retrospectives on Stuart Broad's incredible test career, you can give a bit of time to the T20 qualifiers in Edinburgh last week and Brad Curry's incredible 5 for 13 in Scotland's win over Ireland. He started with three overs in the power play, taking 2 in his first over, bowling a wicket maiden in his third, and got Paul Stirling in the fifth. Then came back in the 19th over with Mark Adair, 72 off 35, and Ireland needing 20 to win, and not only got him out, but only gave up 2 runs with it, effectively ending the match. If you want a moment of the week from outside the Ashes, that's probably it. Well, listeners, somehow Mel was actually there for part of the competition in between that tiny gap between the 4th and 5th test. Mel, how was your trip to Edinburgh?
My detour. Has anyone ever done a detour from Old Trafford to the Oval via the Grange and Goldenacre? I'm not entirely sure that they have. Yeah, I did. That's what my voice is. That's where I started getting a bit like that. I started falling asleep. I started falling apart because I need to fall asleep. Yeah, it was actually brilliant to go up there because it was sort of a reminder of for me, the Ashes are so important. We all talk about the urn and everything else, but up there, I mean, that's cricket with consequences, real life consequences, because any of them slip up on a banana skin, and then that's, they both missed out on going to the World Cup. Scotland by a whisker being knocked out by the Netherlands, and that costs, that's $1 million you don't get. Was $250,000 you don't get if you don't finish first and second in that European qualifier. Both of those teams were really dominant. There were a few sort of little challenges and moments in there from a couple of the other sides, but they were both so fiercely determined. You could just see that, and that was a brilliant bowling performance because Scotland were without Chris Soule. He got a rib injury when he was out in Zimbabwe. So having seen them fall as they did there, it was actually really great to see them winning and to see Ireland winning. Also, that final, what did they score? Because I confess, I had it on my laptop while I was here. sitting here, not inside like you losers who don't understand how to crack the Kia Oval, like the winner who sits in the overflow area outside. So I get all the atmosphere. I still had that match on, and Mark Adair ended up scoring, I think it was 72 off 36. Because Scotland had scored like about, 215, somewhere close to that. So it was actually a cracking game. I had them both on. I'm very, very pleased for those two sides that they're going. And just it was great to get out of the bubble and realise, yes, there is other cricket out here. And actually on a real life consequence level, it's more important than who gets to keep a trophy that will stay in the Lord's Museum anyway.
And yeah, 5 for 13 in a game where 400 runs are scored is quite something.
Absolutely.
Just before we finish, we got a few really great emails over the last few days, but this one is definitely our favourite. This is from Kat, who wrote to Yas, Katia, Ben, Phil, Joe, Mel, and everyone else who's been on the mic across the series. A massive thank you for all the podcasts you've done across the summer. I've loved your regular long podcast for years and hugely appreciate all the vast amounts of work that must have gone into giving us updates after every day's play over the last 7 weeks. A special thank you for introducing some more diverse voices in recent months and the last year. Mel is always a total joy to listen to, and a particular shout out to Katia. As much as I enjoy all of your dulcet tones, brackets, and I do, hearing a regular, new, knowledgeable, passionate female voice as part of the Wisden team has been fantastic. You cannot be what you cannot see or hear. Who knows if there'd been a Katia equivalent on the radio when I was a teenage cricket fan in the 90s, I'd have gone into cricket journalism. A big thank you. Hope you all get a deserved rest now and bring on India. P.S. Could you have a word with someone about that 3-year Ashes cycle idea? I'm sure it'll be pretty popular. Thanks,
nice.
Kat. That is lovely. Thank you so much for sending that in. Well, that is everything from today's show. Thanks, Mel. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Joe. This has been the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. Thanks for joining us across the series. We'll be back next week for another bumper Ashes review show where we'll be picking out our moments of the summer. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we have. Kia are proud to be sponsors of both the Surrey County Cricket Club and the Wisden podcast. We hope you feel this partnership has given you the opportunity to get closer to the action with Kia's movement that inspire moments. There are still plenty of opportunities left to get involved.
Hi, I'm Kumar Sangakkara and I'm speaking to you from the Kia Oval. Hello to all parents of young cricket fans. If you are 11 to 16 years old, or if you are a parent of an 11 to 16-year-old, then this message is for you. As part of the partnership between Surrey County Cricket Club and Kia, this amazing opportunity has been created to motivate and excite you, cricket's next generation. This is your chance as a young cricketer to play here on the hallowed green of the Kia Oval, where I spent some great years playing for Surrey in the sport that I love so much. You could be here at a coaching session with me on Saturday, September the 23rd, before playing out there on the field, courtesy of Kia, who have sponsored this club and ground for over a decade. Cricket has been a huge part of my life since I was a little boy, from the age of about 11 or 12, and I know what an opportunity like this would have meant to me. If you want the chance to be part of this, all you need to do is apply, and we might see each other in September.